All right, guys, welcome back. Part 3 of this series with Mario. All right, so Chicken Ranch, Merlot, and then we're going to talk about the Meritage, the only wine that you like to blend. You get to blend, I should say.
It's the only one that we got.
And all right, so tell us about Chicken Ranch.
Chicken Ranch Merlot, it's a really awesome vineyard in Rutherford. You know, so you were talking about the Rutherford Dust Society, and you know that's kind of like what they generalize, you know, Rutherford fruit as tasting like. And it does have a very earthy, minerally kind of component. For me, the Chicken Ranch Merlot reminds me more of like a Montepulciano. You know, I mean, I love the cedar cigar box aromatics. I love the chewy tannins, you know, that I often associate with Montepulciano. For me, of all of the wines that I make in the Trinchero Napa portfolio, the Chicken Ranch Vineyard is the one that produces the most old world style. And that's because of the soil, the terroir again. You know, you get really deep, rich, fertile soil. It's on the valley floor in Napa and Rutherford, so it's close to the water table. It never needs any irrigation. It's completely dry farmed. The vines grow like weeds. You know, there's a lot of fertility in that soil. So this vineyard requires the most hand labor, you know, just to make sure that we're hedging and that we're pulling leaves and that we're dropping fruit, and then you got to go back and do it again because the regrowth is so intense. You know, so there's a lot of labor that goes into this particular wine. But, you know, I love the style of wine that it produces. You know, of all the wines that come out of Napa, I love wines that kind of throw you for a loop, where I think if you tasted this, you might not guess New World. You know, you might guess Old World, which I think is pretty neat. And
the dustiness on this, you know, they always talk Napa Valley Cabernet, Cabernet, a little bit of Chardonnay. What do you think one of the best Merlot vintages have been? Because it seems like Merlot's always lagging behind Cab.
Yeah.
It's like a stepchild almost. And
I like cooler vintages for Merlot because it increases the hang time. You know, so in 2010, you know, we made a really, really awesome Chicken Ranch Merlot. 2011, the same. Just being on the valley floor and not having any of those really intense afternoons that, you know, you had to worry about shriveling or sunburn or anything like that. The vineyard, the wine was able to hang out there for an extra 2 or 3 weeks that it didn't usually get to. You know, usually I have to pick it because, you know, it's getting too ripe or it's starting to shrivel or the acid is too low. You know, there are certain things that you look at to, you know, gauge when you're going to pick. And also just the arrival of flavors. If the flavors are there, we'll go ahead and pick it. But with 2010 and 2011, those cooler vintages, you know, there was that extra 2 or 3 weeks of hang time, which, you know, develops complexity and develops, you know, flavors that you don't usually get out of Merlot.
Yeah, you get the phenolic ripeness, definitely. Very nice, good effort on this Merlot. Retail roughly?
$35.
All right. You know, it's nice. It's opulent. Good acidity too, and good tannins. All right, so last wine, the Meritage.
Yeah.
Talk to me.
Well, this is, I always call it my desert island wine. You know? I mean, I make 12 wines for Trinchero Napa Valley, so there's a lot of, you know, different vineyard designates, different varieties and whatnot, and I always get the question, you know, well, what's your favorite, you know, and I can never say what my favorite is. I always say that these wines, they're like my children. I love them all equally, but some days I'm a little bit more pleased with one than the other, you know, not to say it doesn't go back and forth, you know, but I love them all equally. If I had to choose one for my desert island, if I could bring one wine to my desert island, it would be the Meritage, because this is the wine that I really get to, you know, be creative with. I love vineyard designates, but when you write that vineyard designation on the label, you know that all of those grapes, or at least 95% of all of those grapes, have to come from that particular vineyard. So my hands are pretty tied when it comes to, you know, blending and trying to make the wines more complex. But that's not a negative thing, because, you know, you really get to taste vintage or variety in a terroir that way. With Meritage, I get to throw out all the rules. I start out by making a Cabernet base, and that Cabernet base comes from our Central Park West vineyard, our Cloud's Nest property that you tasted, and Mario's vineyard that you also tasted. So those 3 vineyards make up the Cabernet base, which is about 70% of the wine. And Cabernet, I refer to it as kind of like a donut wine sometimes. You know, it can have, you know, really big upfront aromatics and nice, you know, roundness and then good finish, but it can have a hole in the middle middle sometimes.
I've never heard an analogy from a winemaker describe a wine like a donut.
Like a donut.
Interesting though.
And Merlot for me, especially not so much the Chicken Ranch Merlot. I don't use this Merlot because of its old world style, while the Meritage is clearly a new world wine. Our other Merlot property, the Vista Montone Vineyard, produces Merlot that has a really voluptuous mid palate. So I use about 15% of that Merlot to kind of fill in the mid palate of the Cabernet blend. So now we got this wine that's really complete. And then there's parts of Petit Verdot in there, about 10% Petit Verdot. The Petit Verdot comes from our Central Park West vineyard, and for me, Petit Verdot is what gives this wine the aromatics that it has. It's no longer, Cabernet driven. The Petit Verdot makes such a big impact on the overall aromatics that it gives us this really beautiful, violet floral kind of component. So about 10% Petit Verdot, and then the kicker is the Cab Franc that goes in here. There's about 5% Cab Franc. And for me, I love the mouthfeel and the finish of Cabernet Franc. And with Meritage, I'm trying to make a wine that is, drinkable right away, nothing that you need to lay down, nothing that you need to age, nothing that you need to ponder. It's a wine that goes great with steak, it goes great with fish, it goes great with potato chips. It's a wine that doesn't necessarily need food to back it up. And the Cab Franc is what really rounds out that finish. It's what, gets rid of that, kind of tannic bite that Cabernet can often have. And that little bit of Cabernet Franc is what really rounds out the finish and makes the wine approachable right away.
It does. It's got a really nice mouthfeel, not too tannic. Acids are right there. It's not going to coat your palate, make you pucker up. And it's a real approachable, easy drinking wine today. I think another 4 or 5 years, it'll probably peak, but that's fine. Some wines you want to be able to buy and drink them now. Other wines you want to lay down for a few years. Other wines you want to lay down for 8 or 9 years. My experience with Napa Valley Cab, I like them between 7 and 10 years old. I think they really integrate well at that age. They haven't really gone over the top and start hitting all that earth tones, yet they still have a little bit of fruit. But it's nice because, the last show, the 2008, it was beautiful. It's drinking wonderfully, but it still has a little bit left to lay down and just integrate.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely, man. All right, well, hey, have a great time in Portland.
I always do. That's easy.
Yeah, drink a couple of good Pinots, take some home with you.
Always do. When it comes to Pinot Noir, I go to Oregon. I shop Oregon. So.
Yeah, and it's nice. And when you talk about the Willamette Valley, how many places in this world grow amazing Pinot? Not many.
Yeah.
It takes certain climates, certain soil, certain rainfall, not too many extreme temperatures, and we just live right here in the middle of it. That's why a lot of the Californians are coming up here now and buying up some property.
You leave the Cabernet to us.
I know. You've got your Cabernet, dude. I would not mess around with it. Man, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it, and I'll come down and see you at your winery. I want to come see your new house.
Got to.
I have to. All right, guys. When you come back, I'll have another winemaker or distributor sitting right next to me.